Okay, so now we are live. And Kurt Kawafuchi, I will just defer to you and you can proceed with the meeting.
Okay, so good afternoon. Welcome to the Council of Revenues General Fund meeting for Monday, March 8, 2021. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and the first item is any communications to the council. Dr. Kobe?
No, we received communication from Marilyn Noel. She sent it to me like 10 minutes ago, which I forwarded to you. That's the only thing we have.
How about from the public?
From the public, nothing.
Okay. Are they allowed to send messages to us?
The public?
Through the chat? Yeah, through the
Yeah,
chat.
if you wanted to invite them to, that's a great question. If they want to make a comment or anything, what they can do is do it in the chat function.
Okay.
And then we can bring them in, and then they can make a public comment if they want to. So you can invite them to do that right now to see if they have.
So do I have to do anything on my side to
We'll
invite
take
them?
care of everything for you. You just ask.
Okay. So if any members of the public have any comments, we can invite you in.
Hello?
Marilyn?
Ooh,
Councilmember Noel, Vice Chair?
Well, do you see me?
no.
You
Let's
don't.
see. No. You're not Seth Colby, are you? Isn't that webcam utility new?
No.
Yes, that's her.
Yeah.
Here.
The reason, Kurt and Marilyn, the reason you came up with my name is I sent you my link.
Yeah.
For everything, so as a follow-up. So Marilyn, just so you know, your name we can't see you, and also your name is Seth Colby. In order to change it, you have to go up to the upper right corner of your pane and click the 3 dots, and you can rename yourself.
Upper right hand corner.
Yeah.
Where it says speaker view.
No, not that far upper right.
Not
just
far.
The upper right of your square. If you hover over the upper right corner of your square, there'll be 3 dots in a row, and you click on that.
In the screen that has everybody's name but mine.
Nope. Just in your screen. When you're looking at your face, or in this case, you will only see EOS webcam utility beta.
Okay, yeah.
Close.
Can you send me a link so that I can you send it to my AOL address?
I don't think a link is going to help you. You're already on the cam, and so the first thing you probably want to do is you probably want to make sure your camera can show, so you can show your face.
Okay.
And then the second thing is I'll walk you through, and so you can rename your actual screen.
Okay, remember now. Okay, so it has Seth Colby.
Look, we can live with her being called Seth Colby. That's not that hard. There we go.
There you are.
Ooh.
Perfect.
Yay.
All right.
Marilyn,
Now we know she's not Seth.
And then just since this is a public meeting, it's probably good to have Marilyn. So when you look at your screen, if you go up to the upper right hand corner, 3 dots will appear when you hover your mouse over the upper right hand corner.
Of your picture.
Okay.
And then you click on those and you see a rename function at the bottom of that list.
Okay.
And then you probably want to put in your name.
I can't get rid of your name.
Click on the rename function.
John will help me. Oh, I know. This is it. That thing doesn't work.
Okay, Kurt. Well, it looks like we have we did not receive any comments for the public in terms
Okay,
of
great.
testimony.
So Dr. Kobe, what's the next item on the agenda? I'm looking for.
The next one is minutes of the meeting of January 7th.
It's
Okay.
fine. It doesn't.
Okay, so I think we all should have gotten the latest edits, right, from Maryland a few minutes, about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but those aren't the minutes are the minutes that we sent out. Marilyn provided a couple comments, which we added in, and Jack provided a comment, which we added in.
Okay. So Marilyn, can you tell us what additional comments you may have added in the last 15, 20 minutes?
Okay, the comments that I have basically have to do with the future forecast. So it's not going to affect the June 30th, 2021 forecast, but it has to do with the restrictions on people getting back to business. And so I added that in. I said that from what I've looked at, and I've called some people and found out that under the current restrictions and the tiers that we have, it doesn't appear.
Marilyn,
Yeah, but
are
that.
you talking about the minutes?
Yeah, are these the minutes, Marilyn?
We're talking about the
excuse me,
minutes.
Yeah.
There was just a small changes I had.
So did you make any changes today, like in the last 20 minutes that you sent to Seth
I sent
the
some to
minutes.
Seth earlier.
earlier today?
Yesterday, which we incorporated. They were very small, like if
grammatical typo?
yeah.
Okay. Okay, so are there any comments on the minutes?
The only thing I saw, and I'm not sure if Marilyn or Jack already took care of it, but in the forecast for 2021, it says 6.5, not negative 6.5.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
We
pretty
caught
good.
that.
Yeah.
Rejected.
Small difference.
Any other comments on the minutes? Okay, does any of the members move to approve?
Move to approve.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, second. Okay, we're gonna vote to approve the minutes. Okay, Vice Chair Newell, Marilyn,
The communication?
the minutes, we're on the minutes now, approval of the
Oh,
minutes.
yes.
Okay, Councilman, Dr. Siderhouse,
Yes.
Dr. Bonham,
Yes.
Councilmember Maynard,
Yes.
Councilmember Gluck,
Yes.
Councilmember Hayashi.
Yes.
Okay, so it's approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda, is it the current year's forecast?
Yeah, discussion of the 2021 forecast.
So I want to open it up to all of the council, the forecast for fiscal 2021.
I put together a quick presentation with the kind of the preliminary results and everything. Would you guys like to see that for the month of February?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine, unless anyone has any concerns. Also, Dr. Kopi, did you send us the monthly statements for February?
I sent it out. We sent it out today, but again, it'll be included in the what you see. So do you guys see my presentation right now?
Yes.
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 So perfect. So I'll just start out. This is the comparative statement that we received today, that you guys should have received today. It was approved by the director and distributed. So what you'll see is with general fund, we're down 10.8%. The GET is lower. February was slightly lower than January. Individual income is still up. Transient and accommodation tax is down, but up slightly from before. One thing I do want to I'll highlight in the next slide actually, but this is if we do adjust for the tax payments that were in July, you'll see here the final numbers. So it does not affect GET, but the individual corporate income tax goes down from 79.8% to 21%. The individual income tax goes down from 15.1 to negative 1.3. So you'll see, you can have an idea with the trends. This is a direct comparison of our collection numbers from February 21 to February 20 instead of the year-to-date collections. And what you'll see is we were down 20.3% for the GET, down a lot in the corporate. Individual income tax is up as people are paying earlier and doing things. Transit and accommodation tax is steadily moving up from past years. And then there was also one of the reasons why this is down more is there was a large refund due to a utility level solar project that was installed in 2019. So if we adjust for that refund, on month would be down 13% versus 22 or 13.3% versus 22%.
That's
what
year
would the
over
annual
year,
be?
not month to month.
Yeah,
That's
what
just
would
month
be
to
the-
month.
How about
Or
the
like-
annual? What
Okay.
would be-
Month
There's
to
what would
March
be the-
20, like, let me be as clear as
Oh,
possible. It's
that's
March
year over year.
2021 compared to March 2020
Yeah.
No,
So Steph,
February.
you gave the month-to-month change, but what would
or
it be
February.
on the annual basis? Would it be like a 1 percentage point?
Yeah, it's between 40 and $50 million. So
Less than 1 percentage then?
yeah, slightly less than 1%.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that last part about?
That was
I
a
asked him-
utility level,
Oh,
level solar project refund. So it was large.
Okay,
So less than 1 percentage point for the,
Yeah.
and based on an annual basis, 40 to 50 million.
Mhm.
what, Seth, I'm sorry to interrupt, but did you do the same sort of thing for January? I'm kind of particularly
Yes.
interested in.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm sorry, I didn't. I did something. I did not do it for January. I apologize.
okay, that's all right. Okay,
Here again is the GET collections by month. So you get an idea of where we are here. So they plummeted right at the beginning of the COVID crisis, right? They rebounded as we went into the summer. They got worse again as we went into full on lockdown, and they've rebounded, but they've come down slightly since the top, right?
So just keep in mind that these collections, so the February collections are January activity.
Correct.
And January was one of the slowest months of visitor arrivals since we reopened in October. So November and December, I think were both stronger than January. And the February arrivals, so February arrivals were over 8,000 a day, right on par with Christmas.
So 8,000, Carl, is what percentage of,
I have a graph on visitor arrivals if you guys want to talk about visitor arrivals.
so it's,
No, I just wanted to make clear that I mean, it makes sense that the February get collections, which were January activity, would be lower.
Exactly. And that's when things were really bad on the mainland, right?
yeah.
Right.
And
Well,
people were
like-
not traveling, and it was right before everybody was getting vaccines.
Yeah, I know like California, Los Angeles had like 45,000 in a day roughly.
Yeah. It was really bad.
So 8,000 and daily average for the state is what, 30,000 a day when we were hitting 10%?
Only in the peak months would have been 30 plus. And we were actually at in February, we actually averaged, I think it was 8,500. Let me see. Seth may have it.
are those visitor arrivals, or are they passengers?
No, these
Here's
are
a set-
visitors.
If you guys
Okay.
want to look, here's the 7-day moving average. So this isn't quite exact dates, but like,
Yeah, but this
This
is
is-
passenger counts. These are not visitors.
oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so what I'm talking about is visitor arrivals, daily visitor arrivals. And so actually it was 8,000, almost 200 per day in February on average. And that's that's very close to a third of what we would have seen in February in 2019. And so far for the first week of March, we've averaged 8,400. And January was only 5,100 or 5,200. So that was the reason I was pointing out how, that the spending corresponded with the February get corresponded with January spending, since it was such a weak month.
Okay.
So actually, we only average 7,500 visitors a day in December. And so all of February and the first week of March have been almost 1,000 visitors a day higher.
So this is just another graph that shows you, this is the year to date. So this is all the collections collected for example, in October. This is the first 4 months of the fiscal year of 2021 compared to the first 4 months of the fiscal year 2020, right? So this is the number that you usually see at the bottom of the preliminary.
Mhm.
So what you see is kind of what you've expected, right? Like we were up very high because of this, the shift in the tax
300.
deadline,
Yeah.
and then we've come down. We're moving gradually further and further down as each month is pulling the average down, right?
Mhm.
So what we're going to start to expect is in March, we're going to either hit a low or start to increase, because probably hit another low, because March collections really didn't reflect what was happening at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And then in April, May, and June, we expect some kind of increase, right? Because the base is getting, well, one is because the base is getting worse, and it's up to you guys to decide if economic activity is improving in absolute terms, as long in addition to relative terms to
'Cause we were,
last year.
we're
And
basically
we're also,
shut down in April and May of 2020. So compared to the economic activity that we're going to be expecting. The other thing is roughly 300 million, right? From the payments with the extension, as well as payments with returns, and estimated payments were pushed into July 2020, over
Yeah.
300 million. So
And
that's
there's
about,
two, and we can talk this year with the individual income tax. There is another source of higher collections, which is one, none of PUA, which represents a significant amount of payments, have not paid in any of their individual income tax thus far. And in unemployment, which is about, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Carl, but I think it's about unemployment of all the kind of like unemployment-ish payments represents about 80% of it. Only a third of those have elected to have their withholding on individual income tax, right? So even though they're low income earners, and so we don't think they're going to make a huge impact on the individual income tax collections, they do have liabilities that normally do not accrue in other years.
Mhm.
So Seth, you're saying that none of the PUA payments had any tax withheld?
but I thought you said a third.
Of the unemployment insurance. So there's two different things with the,
Agreed.
there's the unemployment. So if you were let go of a job, then you apply to unemployment insurance, right? And you can elect to have withholding of your individual income. However, PUA is for the contract workers, right? These are the Uber drivers, the other people, and they're receiving money. But I mean, in theory, they could be paying it on their estimated tax, their quarterly estimated taxes, right? But there's no withholding on them at all.
No, the percentage is basically minimum, I mean, almost non-existence of withholding for the poor payments.
Yeah, they just don't have a way of paying, right? Because they don't get paid on W-2s.
Do we know what the size of the pool of payments were?
Yes, they're, let me finish this presentation and I can find it on my computer, and then
Okay.
when you guys start talking, I can give it to you. Does that work for you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's, of course, what we all are thinking about is there's a legislation passed over the weekend in the Senate of the US Congress, which was considered the biggest hurdle to all of this. What was passed is the American Rescue Plan Act, right? It's $1.9 billion. If we just assume that Hawaii gets a similar ratio as times past, it's additional $5.7 billion. That includes $1.6 billion of direct budgetary support. So the likelihood of layoffs and stuff probably decreases with the passage of this bill.
So we are going to consider legislation on the federal side.
Well, you guys, I'm just telling you what Hawaii would expect, right? So
Yeah.
I'm not saying,
Generally, we don't consider any pending legislation, but given the circumstances in this case, it's obviously extremely likely, right? That the
Yeah.
president will sign.
yeah, because I mean, President Biden has said he will pass it this week,
Yeah.
right? So you guys can depend. Just two things. If it were to pass, that means there's over $20 billion going to Hawaii in a course of about 14 months. To put that in perspective, 2019 visitor expenditures was $17.5 billion. So this is more than all visitor expenditures in a calendar year going to the state. So it's quite, it's a lot of money.
Seth,
Will
is
it
all of
released
this
all
money
at
going to
once?
be?
I mean, in this fiscal year, set,
No, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Because
some
you're
of it didn't
comparing
come in
apples to oranges,
this
right?
fiscal year. It went in over last fiscal year, right? But I'm just kind of putting things in proportion.
It's apples to oranges, right? Because a little bit to some extent, because you're comparing the annual visitor expenditure and you're using this 5.20 million, but we may not receive all of it within one fiscal year.
Correct.
Yeah, my
Jack?
question was, what's the timing of this money?
I mean, the timing of the
not all-
money is, so the first package occurred at the end of March,
last year. So some of it was
or it
last
occurred
year.
mid-March,
Yeah.
right? And then if it's dispersed, Carl can answer that, but I mean, it'll depend, right? So there's unemployment that goes out, least out until September of this
September,
year,
yeah.
right? There's vaccines, there's always a lag if you give it to the state. There is a lag in terms of distribution and things. So it is not apples to apples, but it is just to understand. I didn't do it to say it's a replacement. What I did is to highlight the magnitude of the amount of money coming into the state is enormous,
It is.
right?
Can I make a suggestion that we use some kind of system to to decide who's talking, because I keep hearing voices and people getting interrupted, and it makes it pretty hard to
If we
understand.
could, I guess if we could, as a general rule across the board, let people finish speaking before another person speaks. And I'm guilty of it as much as anyone else. Dr. Bonham?
So in terms of the timing of the spending, the biggest pieces of money are the direct payments to households and the unemployment benefits. I mean, there's, in terms of pieces where we know the timing, right? The direct payments to households are going to be very, very fast. So that'll absolutely happen. Well, that's probably too strong. We're still talking about the federal government. So that will almost certainly happen this fiscal year. And most of the unemployment benefits will also be this fiscal year because because as unemployment goes down, they'll dwindle in size also in the as we get into May and June, and then those extra payments expire in September. And so the roughly $2 billion that's going to state and local governments, how long it takes for that to play out, we really don't know. Some of it is for vaccination, so that should come through pretty quickly. I guess I would argue that in past forecasts, UHERO and DBED have both, I think, significantly underestimated. I mean, do you think about when the first CARES Act went through, we dramatically underestimated the impact. I think we've learned from our errors, but I would be willing to argue that we're still going to underestimate the impact, and we're much more likely to see stronger income growth. And actually, so Seth, are you finished with your presentation? Or should
I just two seconds, right? This is visitor arrival, or this is just passenger counts, and they're kind of moving up, right? And what you're seeing is February, the decline. This is the decline that we saw in the GET for the month of February, right? And then so we should probably expect higher GET collections going forward. And this is your forecast. right? So I am done. I will look for that information, Kurt, that you were looking for, PUA versus thing. And then if you guys do want to talk about use that Excel spreadsheet model, I can bring it up. If not, no worries.
We'll let you know. But thank you, Dr. Kobe. Okay, so I want to open it up for discussion on the current year general fund forecasts. Dr. Bonham?
So since following on that train of thought that we're more likely to underestimate economic activity than to overestimate it. And in fact, that's been our model so far, right? So, and part of that is simply because of the size of the federal stimulus. And it's also a characteristic of forecasting. If you look at, I mean, pretty much any research that you look at that evaluates how economists and how professional forecasters perform always finds that they under forecast when the economy is turning up and they over forecast when the economy is turning down. And when you look at, so if we can look at table 3 of the handout that has our it's forecast of key economic indicators for fiscal 21 to fiscal 27. It's on page 3 of the handout. And I'm going to point to several things that I think, and the reason I wanted to bring this up is because these are the numbers that effectively go into the models. You know, we have our individual inputs, but we also have a model output that is based on the averages of all these, basically based on these numbers. And so the one thing I would point to is the visitor arrivals numbers for 2022 and beyond. And I mean, I noticed this because I saw the growth rate in panel B of the table. The growth rate of visitor arrivals in 2022 is only 99%. And when you look at the 4.6 million visitors that our consensus forecast has for 2022, that's only 46% of where we were in fiscal 19. And in fiscal 23, our consensus is only 58% of fiscal 19 levels. So that's essentially saying, I mean, that right now, February is already 30% of 2019 levels. And I'll finish this train of thought and then I'll stop so we can have a conversation. And I think if you looked at UHERO's forecast or DVED's forecast, you'd find that the visitor arrivals numbers for fiscal 2022 would be much, much higher. In UHERO's forecast, it's 69% of in 2021 and 85% in 2022 in terms of comparison to fiscal 19. Now I'll stop and we can chat.
What do you think it's going to be for fiscal 2021? Because we had those months when we were closed down, right, from July, August, September, and partial October.
So I couldn't quite understand your question, Kurt.
What do you think the raw numbers of visitor arrivals is going to be for fiscal 21, considering that, you know, we were kind of shut down in July, August, September, and half of October?
So in our forecast, the raw numbers for visitors in fiscal, let's see, fiscal 2021. Actually, it's very close to what the council has. I think it's, yeah, I have almost exactly the same number that the council consensus is. 2.2 to 2.2. The council has 2.3 million.
Okay.
I think I have 2.2 million.
Thank you.
Yeah. Seth had a question or a comment.
Just get back to your question, Chairman Kawafuchi. The PUA is 23% of all of the payments paid.
And what's the dollar amount of all payments?
Up until July, or up until up until till mid-January, it was 4.6 billion.
Okay, thank you. That's a big number.
Can I go back to the table 3 again? So if unless I hear an objection, I was going to go back to table 3 and point out. So my argument or my suggestion is that our visitor forecast in the coming fiscal years is significantly too low. So instead of a 99% growth rate, it ought to be more like a 200% growth rate in fiscal 2022. And then to focus more on fiscal 21 for a moment, the council's forecast of income, this is a major component in the models. It's a really important component in the model. And the council's forecast is minus 1.3% in fiscal 21. That's essentially impossible given the federal stimulus money. The total personal income will almost certainly be positive. The forecast that comes out of UHERO's model is 2% growth in fiscal 2021. And that's even taking into account that the fiscal stimulus is going to end. Well, actually, it really won't be ending during fiscal 2021. That's really a 2022 issue. And then I would also suggest that the council's forecast for US GDP in fiscal 2022 and 23 is 1 or 2 percentage points lower than the consensus, which is, and I think really most of this reflects not taking into account the American Recovery Plan that is about to be passed.
Dr. Bonham, what's your and Dr. Seidelhaus's view of inflation at this point?
I'll take a shot. I mean, at present, still relatively low, but you see signs of it in, shortages in commodity areas and rates some rates starting to go up. So that, I think there's some concern about inflation, but I don't think that anybody's thinking about hyperinflation at this point, obviously. So, I haven't, in my forecast, I haven't increased the inflation. I mean, I've increased the inflation rates, I think by about 0.5 percentage point for my personal forecasts.
I know with gas prices going up and all the money coming into the economy, I'm wondering, if it might be higher than 0.5%.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's how much I adjusted my inflation numbers. And yes, in fact, it might be higher than 5%. I'm sorry, 0.5%.
Okay.
0.5. And I'm talking about the extent to which I've increased my forecast or should increase my forecast for inflation.
Interest rates are starting to climb too, right? The long-term.
So our forecast for inflation is a bit higher than the council's. I think we're at about 1.4% for the fiscal year. That'll probably end up being too high of a forecast. Janet Yellen just spoke about this today because obviously the bond market is concerned about inflation. But they're also, what they're really focused on is the fact that they think the US economy is about to take off and that their growth rate forecasts are significantly higher than the council's. So I'm talking about in fiscal 2022 forecasts for GDP growth of 5% and more than 5% in fiscal 23 compared to the councils of 4.6 and 4. And so I think there's some reason to think the inflation could be a little higher, but again, not a major concern at this point. I mean, the Fed thinks they have the ammunition to deal with this if inflation expectations start to rise. And as what Janet Yellen pointed out was that, look, we had really low inflation even before the pandemic when the unemployment rate was at near record lows. And now we still have almost 10 million people unemployed nationally. it seems highly unlikely that we're going to see anything other than sort of one-time surges related to commodities and assets.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sidehouse, Dr. Bond. Anyone else have comments about the pending?
Chair?
current fiscal year?
Could I
Vice Chair?
make some comments?
Yes.
Okay, I guess with this pandemic, it's become very obvious that we are very dependent upon tourism. And this last year, we have a lot of businesses going out of business or insolvent. I mean, you can just look around and there are a lot of restaurants, a lot of retail stores, a lot of Love's Bakery,
Yeah.
a lot of people who you think would survive this pandemic and the downturn, and they are actually either on the edge of going under or are insolvent or are going to go bankrupt in the future. And I think that this economic loss, don't forget that we went through this bad thing, and the PPP money is not sufficient to keep people going. So you're going to see in the future, and there was a lot of deferral of rent and all that, you're going to see in the future that these temporary solutions are going to come back to haunt us as far as that. And also the fact that a lot of businesses have done very poorly is going to show up in our April collections, because people just don't have the money. I mean, I'm going through returns now, and I'm seeing people who have lost so much money on their rentals, the rental condos, tourism. I mean, we have so many of those here. And the income tax effect of that is that there's a lot of people who have losses. A lot of people going to be forced to sell because they can't pay the mortgages. And so I think the business community is going to, that loss is going to be showing up, even if there's selected businesses like, I would say, Costco or Target or those big box stores that have done well. So it's a very selective group of businesses that have done well, but the small businesses that I see that rely upon tourism, or, there's it's a lot of people who rely upon the tourism business here, and you'd be surprised, entertainers, tour companies and all that. It's just, it's quite amazing who is being affected. The other thing that's happening that I see is people are hunkering down at home. They had to stay at home, and a lot of people who are my clients who they just didn't want to go out, and so they didn't go out, they didn't shop, except for the groceries. And so they ordered a lot of things through Amazon, and I don't think that helps. You earn your wage and then you just buy from Amazon and don't really shop local, and you end up really affecting the local businesses. And so I think that those two things work against having a really great result for this fiscal year, for this last fiscal year. And I guess we have, I think, come to the conclusion that there's nothing that we can do to replace tourism on a short-term basis. We talked about diversifying the economy, but the amount of income that we're getting from tourism, I don't see that we have an option to replace it. And what's more concerning is that a lot of the manufacturing companies, including Love's Bakery, Hawaiian Host had some problems. We're having problems with people who used to cater to tourists and we're used to sell products to them. Those businesses have been going under. And so those are my concerns, that, the tourism coming in is one thing, but we can't forget that in the past, we did sustain a lot of damage there that we're not seeing right now because of the federal money that came in, because banks have been willing to defer credit card payments, loans, and whatever. So there's a lot of deferral of this, and a lot of people haven't been paying their bills. There's a lot of receivables out there, and sometime in the future, all those receivables, you know, the person who's a creditor is not going to say, okay, I forgive you because of the pandemic. And so those are my concerns.
Well, thank you, Vice Chair. Dr. Bonham?
So I think Marilyn's points are right on the money, right? I mean, many businesses have failed, but one thing we do have to keep in mind is that many of them didn't pay that tax last year at this time, right? So they didn't pay their taxes in April last year. And so even if they pay nothing this year, there's no loss in terms of year-over-year growth, right? That starts in the next fiscal year. So I think the points are well taken. There's actually evidence that we're seeing very rapid new business formation. The census has been publishing new data that they've been gathering nationwide. And if I'm not sure if I'm able to drag a chart into the chat. I'll try. No, can't. Doesn't look like I can put it in the chat. Let's see. Maybe I can use the. No.
Share your screen.
I can, but I can just describe it. But the number of new business applications in Hawaii, and this is true nationally as well, has really surged. And so, while we may see businesses that we're used to visiting failing, some of them are restarting in different in different areas. Most of these are probably online. That's what the data seems to suggest nationally is that a lot of businesses are relaunching, changing their business models. So you can imagine, for example, a restaurant that goes out of business and now the proprietors are now cooking from their home and only doing delivery. And so they've set up a business with online sales. Obviously, those are not substitutes for each other, but there is good evidence that the economy is rebounding in terms of business formation.
Thank you, Dr. Sidehouse. And when you said they weren't paying their taxes, you were referring to the income taxes, right? Not the general excise taxes.
Correct. Yeah, sure.
Councilmember Dr. Sidehouse, what's your thoughts?
Well, Scott had his hand up, so if he wants to.
I didn't see it. Okay. Councilmember Hayashi, I didn't see, sorry. I didn't see your hand up because my screen only covers 5 people.
You can change that.
That's great. So, Marilyn made some good points. But one of the questions that I have is, based upon the presentation that Dr. Colby just made with regard to the additional funding that's coming in, at least for the current fiscal year, it sounds like there's going to be sufficient funding coming in that may offset some of the detriment that I think Marilyn was referring to. So my question overall to the board is, the council here is whether or not, it's appropriate for us to consider that additional funding. It sounds like it's passed the Senate, which is, I think, the largest hurdle. House is taking it up for a vote, I believe, on Wednesday, and Biden's already announced his intention to sign it if and when it's passed. So I know in the past, we typically do not consider pending legislation, but in this situation, it sounds like this thing is almost there. So I guess the question I pose to the council is it appropriate for us to consider this funding at this point in time?
Very good question. Yeah, I don't know. What do the other council members think about that?
If I may, I don't know whose turn it is.
Councilmember Maynard, yes.
But going back to Seth's point, this is a huge amount of money that is just being dumped, distributed into the state as if by a helicopter, and it's falling perhaps not where, it's hard to say if it's going in the right places, but it's coming and it's going to be here. So it does make for some unusual numbers, and it's hard to always interpret those. As Carl was saying, there certainly has been increases in personal income that we had not necessarily taken into account when we did our first forecast. But personal income is way up all over the place. At the same time, savings is way up all over the place. So people aren't necessarily taking this money and spending it because it's, you know, especially the one-time payments that have now come in several times, but people use it to pay down debt or to save rather than go out and spend it as one normally would if they had an increase in let's say salary or something like that can be depended on to continue. But it's a huge amount of money. And I think we do have to consider it. Certainly when I'm looking at my numbers, partly because of my math background, is that when looking at percent changes, I think it's you can come up with some interesting numbers, but I always try to take the percentage, put the actual dollar or passenger count or whatever, and see where that takes us. And if we anticipate that we're going to be back up to maybe something equal to normal, how long will it take us to get there? And I put all my numbers in there to say, well, within about 4 years, we should be back to normal. It may take a while for people to be comfortable traveling again. But my instinct, for what it's worth, is that people will adapt rather quickly to going out and eating in groups and traveling, and with or without masks. I think that we may see things coming back maybe sooner than what we had anticipated.
Oh, thank you, Councilmember Mena. One thing I would comment, I went out and asked some experienced CPAs in town, what do you expect the profits to be down or taxable, the actual tax that people are going to pay for 2020, as well as estimated payments, which is generally based on their 2020 liability. And the range that they say, it's still very early, but as best as they can tell, the range is maybe 20 to 25%. But keep in mind, that's only, that's not all, that's a small portion of the income tax, the net income.
Talking down 20 to 25%?
20 to 25% based on profits.
Down.
Yeah. So in other words, their payments with the 2020 return or the extensions or the 2021 estimated payments is going to be down roughly 20 to 25%. Yes. Dr. Saidos?
Well, can I kind of bring the discussion specifically to the forecast for
Sure.
2021?
Sure.
I mean, if we look at the latest data that we have and that Seth gave us, we're basically comparing COVID time period in this fiscal year 2021 to non-COVID time period through February, right? And that's down. If you don't take the shift of the income tax payments into consideration, that's down 17%. And given how deep tourism has fallen off during this time period, I mean, if you think about it, that's a surprisingly low or small decline, if you will. If you take the shift of the $300 million into account, we're down minus 10 or almost, let's say minus 11%. So the question for me is, in the 4 months that we have remaining for this fiscal year, are our actual revenues for these years, considering the partial return of tourism, going to be such that they'll make up for this minus 10%? And it seems likely that that's a good possibility, because in part because March, but more so April, May, and June are really, really low months because of the effect of the pandemic, as well as the shift of the tax money or income tax money. So, when I used Seth's spreadsheet for this, which is kind of monthly based, and what do you think the month-on-month changes are going to be? And I said, you know, March is going to be down 10% over prior year's March. April is going to be down only 5% over prior year April. And I could be convinced that it might not even be down. It might in fact be up in April this year compared to April last year. But May and June are up 15% each. Then I'm coming up with a negative 2.6% growth rate for all revenues for the entire fiscal year 2021. And since, you know, that's the focus of this part of the agenda, I'd like to kind of, you know, put that out there as at least a discussion point.
What was the number again, Dr. Saidos?
Minus 2.6, but let's not quibble about anything behind the decimal.
Okay.
Could I say something?
Vice Chair, you want?
Yeah, I think, you know, if you look at last year's April figures, you'll find that we still had income. You know, I thought it was going to be like nothing, but actually what came out in April is all the GET collections that was collected in March before the shutdown. So we have that. And the other thing that, you know, the PPP, loans, the deductions that were, I guess, were allowed at the year end. You know, a lot of practitioners assumed, there's a lot of people who are assuming that there's going to be federal state compliance with that year end. In other words, they might be taking the deductions for the PPP deductions that they had related to the PPP funds they got in 2020. And so you might see some adjust. I mean, it's been very, very hard for practitioners. I mean, the IRS has not been able to keep up with everything because they haven't processed a lot of the 2019 returns yet. So there's a lot of notices coming about that. And it's kind of chaotic because of the fact that people are trying to help their clients with the PPP2 and do all of this work at the same time. And the PPP2 and the forgiveness and all that, it doesn't seem to be very many people who qualify under the PPP2 compared to last year's PPP loans. There are people who got maybe 20% down rather than 25%. And so, you know, they lost money, but it was arbitrarily set. And so people didn't qualify for the PPP2. And if you look at what's happening now with all the PPP funds, it's more targeted toward like nonprofits, Chamber of Commerce's, and restaurants. But there's a lot of other businesses that have suffered that won't qualify under the subsequent loans for the PPP funding. So it's not like everyone is getting, all the small businesses that have been hurt is getting that money. So I still think that, you know, because you're going to have maybe some people who thought that that was going to be allowed, you know, by the state legislature, that they might have said, okay, we'll just take it, because when the computers are programmed and we have our software and you're plugging in the numbers for feds for the deductions, there's nothing that says diagnostic, you can't take this. So a lot of, I would say, practitioners who may be not keeping up with the state legislation might not realize that that's not deductible.
Marilyn, you mentioned the 25% decrease in profits to qualify for like the PPP2. Isn't that what happened to Love's Bakery?
Yes, it is what happens to Love's, and it's happened to other clients that I see. You know, people have not been able to qualify for PPP2, and the main people who have qualified would have been the restaurants who were completely shut down. But a lot of the other businesses who were involved in manufacturing or tourism or things like that, they have been suffering. And I got yelled at by another fellow practitioner because he said, people don't realize how bad it is for the small businesses in Hawaii. We have a lot of long-time businesses that, you know, have very little cash, and they're really, really suffering. And maybe the bankers have seen it, but we have a lot of small businesses in Hawaii, long-time businesses who can't make it. And so that's a concern is, yeah, you know, it takes a long time to start a new business. I'd say several years, maybe. It's not like a business like Love's goes down and the next day another company takes over. You know, that would take a lot longer because you'd have to get the capital, you'd have to get the employees and all that. So starting a new business is not a fast deal. And yet we've seen a lot of people being affected, and you've seen not many bankruptcies now because there've been a lot of deferrals. The banks have given people a little bit leeway and paying mortgages and credit cards, and legislation has made it so that people cannot foreclose on their tenants. So, you know, there's all this accumulated debt that is going through our economy that people may not see, and they might think it's okay, but if you're in the business environment or you owned a condo, you'll be, I guess, freaking out with the amount of damage there is. And a lot of people who don't work, you know, in a business or who are getting a regular paycheck won't realize how bad it is in the business community. I said, except for some of these bigger companies, bigger box stores, I guess, except for Macy's.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I
That's
want
yours.
to ask for any comments and input from Councilmember Gluck.
I don't have very many comments. I would say just I'm coming up with numbers very close to what Jack or Dr. Seider has noted for 2021. Just looking at the last couple of months that we have, my model, I'm at about -3. That's assuming, you know, that because we have such a low base, we were already starting to see the impact for COVID numbers in the last couple months of fiscal year 2021. And then we should have, even if the tax payments this year are lower than last year, if with corporate and individuals, we should still have some money that, I mean, last year's base was 0. So there has to be some up from that.
Can I make one comment? You have to account also for estimated taxes that are not going to be paid because of the lower taxable income. So it's not only the balance of taxes due, but also the estimated taxes.
So you mean people won't be paying taxes on all those stock market gains that they had when they pulled out before the new administration raises their taxes?
Oh, they haven't done that yet. They maybe they'll do that this year, but so
or
far,
just plain taking profits because they saw how frothy the market was. So, you know, we don't, and the other gains are, I mean, anybody who's selling a house right now almost certainly had gains. And, you know, we've seen, so we don't know what the estimated taxes are going to be in total, right? Obviously, small businesses and are likely to be hurting. Is anybody else frozen? Or maybe Kurt's just not moving. Okay.
No, I can see
Sorry.
I can see mine.
You know, the one, I think Marilyn's point about April, you know, still being, you know, when we start looking at April of this year, April of last year still had the activity in March. That's obviously true. But when you go into May and June, you're talking about a period with essentially 0 tourists.
Yeah.
And 0 visitor spending, and the collections for the activity in April and May of this year, which is May and June collections, you know, we're probably talking about numbers that are maybe even half of what we saw in 2019. If you look at the bookings data for March right now, right, spring break is, so in California, the spring break is the end of March into the first week of April. And those bookings are the strongest we've seen yet for any period since the pandemic. And so, the excise tax collections are going to start to stabilize. And those businesses that have had no revenue are going to start to have revenue again. And we're going to be comparing all of the income tax collections of any kind, all the tax collections, not just income tax collections, to a period when the many taxpayers didn't pay any tax other than excise at all because of the shifting of. And if you look at our model, despite the fact that I would argue our consensus forecasts are way too low in some cases, the model, the average of the inputs model gives us -2. That's still lower than what I think the forecast ought to be, but I think it's pretty reasonable. It's getting close. And one last thing, and then I'll shut up. We have under forecast every single time since we started forecasting the pandemic. So revenues have been going up faster than we thought over the last year.
But they decreased the last 2 months, Carl. They went down.
Talking about our fiscal year forecast, we've been raising them you can't individual months of forecast. Individual months of data. I just don't put a whole lot of stock in it.
But
right? It's just too noisy.
But one thing I would note is we're -10.8, and the further you get into the year, it's harder to pull it up because you have more months.
Except you're comparing it to zero.
No. I mean, in terms of activity, I agree. Zero activity. Yeah. We're probably going to get a lot more payments for, even if it's reduced on the profits of taxpayers, we're still going to get a lot more for April and June for both the payments with returns, payments with the extensions, and also the estimated payments for April and June.
But your point that it's hard to make up in 2 months, it's hard to make up.
Yes.
-10 is well taken.
Yeah.
But we have 4 months.
If I could say, first of all, could I clarify? I know the CARES Act money, the dollar amounts that people just come out of the sky, those are not taxable on the federal side, and I'm assuming on the state side also.
The state side, the Fed said that there are going to be deductions related to the CARES Act money was going to be deductible.
I'm not talking about the PPP. I'm talking about the stimulus checks that people are getting. The $1,400.
Oh, that's not taxable.
On either side, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the unemployment is taxable.
Only the unemployment.
Well, it used to be.
Unemployment is taxable, right. Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that because that is a lot of money that's coming in potentially for people to spend, but it's not going to be taxable income. But I think we included, when we look at personal income, it includes all those payments. So while personal income may be going up substantially, we're not necessarily seeing an increase in income taxes based on that personal income. Because a lot of
personal income is not going up in our forecast. So
it is in my forecast, Carl.
Yeah.
But when I just threw some numbers into this calculation, I get an improvement to -3.8 versus our down whatever we were before. So I do see an improvement.
Yeah. I don't know, Marilyn, what do you think? I mean, that seems like a pretty reasonable number, right?
Well, if you I'm kind of uncomfortable going down from -11 all the way down to -3 for the few months, just because we're so far, into the year with that -11, and we have to kind of reverse it. I mean, that's a lot of money to reverse out from -11 down. And I was looking at some of the work papers that Seth had done about the, using the tables, his worksheet, about what they had come up with. And I don't know why, but it came out to -6. And when I was just running some numbers about what I thought would be the downturn for the taxes in April, I came out to about the -6, what he has. So if you look at his schedule, that's kind of like closer to what I've came up with. Did you kind of work out his schedule?
Okay.
So,
Councilmember Gluck, and I know Dr. Bonham is raised his hand too.
Yeah, I think Councilmember Hayashi had something to share as well. I just wanted to comment to Marilyn, or to respond, the way that Dr. Colby had this set up was to get to the 6.5 that we had forecasted at the last meeting. That's the only reason he had those numbers in there. So he's not telling us that that's what it's going to be. He just built this model and input numbers for the last 4 months to get us to the 6.5 that we forecasted in January.
Dr. Colby, could I, just a moment, have you done a modeling of what we need to average for the rest of the year to come out at 6.5, a negative 6.5?
I can figure that out for you right now. I'll do that. I'll get back to you.
Okay. Councilmember Hayashi, you had some comments?
Actually, I just had a quick question for Carl. And I don't know if the visitor count you mentioned was at 8,500 or so, roughly, right? $8,500 people a day. Just curious. I mean, with the CDC guidance right now that just came out today, that's discouraging people from traveling via air, is that factor? Do you think that that's going to have any real impact to that number at all?
Well, so it hasn't yet, right? So, if you look at, I mean, they were telling people not to travel back in December, and we had over 7,000 visitors a day. So what the visitor data shows me is that there's a bunch of pent up demand for travel to Hawaii. And yeah, and so, I mean, I can tell you that I'm more concerned about whether the state is prepared for 9,000, 10,000, 15,000 visitors a day in May and June, right? So look at it this way. Come summer, right? So let's say last week of May, I mean, the Biden administration has said there will be enough vaccines for everybody in the country by May. I think it was the end of May. That doesn't mean it'll be in everybody's arm, but I would suggest that the vast majority of the flying public from the US will have been vaccinated by May and June. And that completely changes people's thinking about their willingness to travel. And by May and June, a large portion of Hawaii's population that cares to be vaccinated will likely be vaccinated. And that changes, hopefully that changes our willingness to host visitors as well. So I think we're all going to be quite surprised by how rapid the bounce back is in visitor arrivals and visitor spending. And I already know that we've got businesses that aren't operating and the experience is different. But think about it this way: the experience on Maui, on Kauai, on Oahu, on the Big Island is better than it is anywhere else, right? It's not what it used to be, but it's still better than just about anywhere else in the country. So I don't know if I answered your question or if I just ranted, but.
No, actually, then that raises a good point too, because those 8,500 visitors are primarily from the mainland, right? And it's not considering international travel. So when that opens up, we could see that number jump up significantly, I would think. When Japan's ready to open up again, I mean, it would seem that number could be huge at that point. So that's a good point.
It could be, yeah. I mean, we actually, the international market is one of the things that's dragging our forecast down because they're not vaccinating like we are, right? Mm-hmm. So Australia, South Korea, Japan, just in the last couple of weeks started vaccinating, and instead of having 10 to 15% of the population vaccinated, they're like 1%. And so I think Canada will be the next. I mean, they're further along, but those could also rapidly change, right? So you could see a rapid increase in vaccinations there. And then, yes, you're right, that's a big piece that's really not in the market right now.
Did you, Dr. Bonham, did you also look at like places like Southern California? Because until recently, even if they came to Hawaii, when they went back, they would have to stay at home, like in Los Angeles, for 10 or 14 days.
Right, but those restrictions have gone away. By and large, they've gone away. I'm pretty sure they've gone away in LA, and certainly in Northern California. And so then that's the other thing that's changing is as the case counts come down, and I'm not suggesting that the pandemic's over, right? And that people aren't going to be wearing masks and anything like that. But it's really a stark difference. And as the case counts come down and fewer people are getting tested, it makes it even easier for people to get tested to come to Hawaii.
Can I mention something?
Vice Chair Newell?
Yeah, I've traveled to California 3 weeks ago. So I've kind of taken a look around to see how things are, and they had a complete shutdown because the virus count was so high. And, things are not quite the same as far as our customers. I overhear people talking about how they lost their business because they totally shut down indoor and outdoor dining except for takeout. And they had so much shutdown, I guess, that they are trying to get the governor to removed. And so, our customer, who is our customer, has changed as far as the behavior. Their amount of the wealth for a lot of the business owners are not there. And also a lot of people have gotten into the habit of buying RVs and traveling around the US domestically rather than flying and the planes, and maybe it's the CDC who says, it's better to drive rather than be, fly in a plane with possible people who are infected. And so because of that, the flying is not going to, the amount of people willing to fly in the plane is not going to go up until everybody's vaccinated. For Japan, I've been watching that because I want to go to Japan, and they're not anywhere close to letting in US people, and they have a quarantine for anybody going to Japan. You'd have the 14-day quarantine. So because of the COVID, the market is not quite as, it's not going to be the same as in the past. If there's variants, then the CDC is going to come out with more guidance, be careful and all that, and we have to test this vaccine. So there's always all this uncertainty about the pandemic. It's not like you can say for sure that the pandemic is going to end. There might be variants or mutations. Yep.
Thank you, Vice Chair Newell. I wanted to ask the tax director if he can provide us any additional information that might be useful in terms of collecting revenue or what he's seeing, what revenue trends he's seen. Director?
No. No, I don't want to jump into this discussion. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that, but
Okay. You don't want to talk about your projects to collect more money faster?
no, you guys are having too much fun.
Okay.
I think Jack has his hand up.
Okay, Dr. Siderhouse?
Yeah, I have my hand up in spite of the fun that we're having. I think that we've talked about this particular subject now for over an hour, and I think that we need to focus on the forecast. And so as a way of doing that, I'm going to make a motion that we use negative 2.5% as our 2021 forecast.
Thank you. So there's a motion, and Dr. Bonham's raising his hand. He's going to second the motion. And do you have any other comments, Dr. Bonham?
I'll just make one quick comment. So we were talking about the fact that the market is different, our people's willingness to travel is different. The pandemic's not suddenly going to be over. And then there was a statement made that people weren't going to be willing to travel until everybody's been vaccinated. You got to keep in mind that what we're doing is we're comparing the next 4 months to the same 4 months last year when no one was traveling. And so we're not talking about going back to 10 million visitors a year. We're talking about going from 0 visitor arrivals to 10 or 11 or 12,000 visitors a day. And that's going to happen long before everyone is vaccinated. You're going to see it this March and April.
Last March, didn't we have some tourists at the beginning of March? Because when we had our council meeting,
Sure. Yeah, we lost all the international visitors, but we still had the US visitors in March of last year.
Dr. Bonham, Dr. Colby, were you able to kind of model what we need to average for the rest of the last
Yep.
4 months to come out with -6.5?
To get to -6.5%, you need to have 5% growth
5%.
and this is
March, April,
for
May.
March through June of 2021 compared to March through June of 2020.
Okay.
So you have to have a 5% increase in revenues for those 4 months to get to -6.5. To get
Is
to
that,
ne-
is
to-
that not
get-
counting the 300 million? Sorry.
Yeah, not counting the 300. And also we're comparing off a base when there was very little activity, right, in April and May of last year. I mean,
that's
there's a
not
tremendous
counting. I mean,
decline.
that's counting what was collected in
Yeah.
of last quarter to this quarter, right?
Yeah. When I say no activity, almost no tourist activity in April of 20 and May of
Yeah.
20.
In order to get to 3%, you need to have 17.8% growth.
Ooh.
And in order to get to
-3 or positive?
-2.5%, you need to have an increase in 19.5% growth.
Ooh.
But that's also assuming no income tax.
Yes.
But if you add the 300 million in,
If you add the whole 300 million in,
that's another 7%, right?
Well, maybe you also take it down a little bit.
Or time takes it down, but
Yeah, you're gonna have to take
you don't
down.
need as much. You don't need as much organic growth if you add the 300 million back in.
Well, excuse me. I think that, you're looking at some pretty high growth numbers and not taking account that we're going to have less revenue collected from all the businesses that have had problems and people who haven't collected rent money. And so there's on the cash basis. So there's going to be a lot of damage, I think, on the April 15th for people who owed money. There's a lot of people who have suffered. Not the, government, but I guess maybe here on Maui, we see it, and the neighbor islands, we see it.
Maryland, they didn't pay their income tax last year.
Some people did. I
No.
mean,
Well,
No,
yeah,
of course.
yeah.
The 300 million people, or $300 million didn't.
well, 300 million paid in July, right?
Yeah,
And that
I
was
had my
estimated
clients pay in
payment.
April.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted Seth to bring out what was there in the month of March, April, May, and June.
so I'm sorry, go ahead. With the payments, if you have the payments included, it's in order to get 3%, you just need 0.9% growth. If you want to get to -2.5% growth, you just need 2.6% growth. If you have the payments included from last year, the same payments included from last year.
Oh, yeah, we're not
What
going to have the
percentage
same
of
thing.
do we know what percentage of the general fund is attributable to tourism?
We had surmised that direct tax collections is about 20% of of general fund collections, and then if you did indirect, like if you really included people's paychecks and everything, then it can go to 30%. But like I would use the -20%, right? Because people have gotten compensated for their loss of employment for the most part.
What do we get if we have like 275 million rather than 300 million to account for the decrease in profits, which translate into less taxes paid with the 2020 return and less estimated tax payments, which is going to be based on 2020 generally. For the
You would need 4.4% growth to get to negative 2.5% with only 275 million of payments.
So if you assume that the July payment from last year is 25% less because of the downturn from the businesses and people who didn't receive the rent, how much would that amount to?
That's 231 million. So
25% is what, 50?
25%?
That's only a 230
Is
million.
that a 1.5%?
yeah. So then you need to grow, in order to get to negative 2.5%, you need to grow at 6.8%.
That's negative.
Jessica's had her hand up for a couple of times.
I'm
Sorry, I was just looking at the numbers. So I had plugged in the 25% collection less on the income tax based on the discussion we had earlier and Kurt's numbers of 20 to 25% lower on income tax collections. And I was coming up at right around 7% growth that Dr. Colby just noted, off a very low base for those last 4 months of the year, right? So I do think that's reasonable and achievable to get to the negative 2.5% for this year.
And all council member Clark, did you plug reduce the 25% against the whole net income, or just, I would just apply it to the payments with the returns or estimated tax payments?
Right, just that 300,000 that got paid late
300
last
million.
Yeah, sorry, 300 million.
My dog.
Does he have or she have an opinion?
Vice Chairman Newell, do you have any further
We need all the help we can get.
things that
No, I'd be more comfortable with a 6% growth rate, a negative 6% growth rate.
I think you're a couple points higher than everyone else at this point. Unless
It's
Maybe maybe a straw poll would help.
So just to let you know, Marilyn, and if you wanted to assume your 231 million, you would have to achieve that, you would have to have a decrease of revenues relative to the year before of 7.7%.
okay. And then March, we had some income yet, right?
Well, March income of 2020 March income was already 12.6% below the year before. So even in March, if you recall, in February in Asia, we had already started losing our tourists, right? And so, and another thing that happened in March, I believe it was very end of March, but the IRS had said, don't worry about your taxes. Right. So that was already showing up in terms of estimated tax payments. People were not paying.
People were already staying at home too.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
in March, people were already
The pandemic had already begun in March.
Down. Yeah.
I remember
So
January 21st was the date that they shut down flights from China of 2020. Sorry.
So we had the Japanese visitor count had fallen precipitously during late February, and so it seems to me like, we have a forecast from our last meeting of -6.5, and Seth just gave us a calculation that basically said, well, we couldn't see any growth. We'd have to see over 7% decline on average for the next 4 months to hit that target. So it's pretty clear that 6.5 is not something that we're going to settle on. Even to get to 6%, you'd have to have, you basically have to continue to lose tax revenue for the rest of the year. And I don't think anybody believes that that's likely, even with all the details we've been talking about businesses lost profits, when we're making a comparison to a period of time where there was really no activity and many people not paying their taxes. The question is, what are we going to settle on? We have a 2.5% proposal that's been seconded. I'm comfortable with that. I get the sense that many people are pretty darn close to that. So I think it's 3:30. I would either call the question or have a straw poll.
And I want to just make clear, are we all assuming, and we're going to put it in the letter, we're assuming the federal stimulus bill is going to pass?
Yes.
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah. Anyone have any objection to us putting that in the letter? We're assuming the federal stimulus bill passes.
It will be passed before the letter is signed.
When is the letter due? Is it tomorrow or is it Wednesday or next week?
Due on the 15th.
Okay. Yeah, then I would. I think,
Can we have the vote, please?
Marilyn, any last words?
I think negative 2.5 is too low.
I mean.
Well, then vote no.
Yeah, okay, I will.
Okay. Okay. Vice Chair Nguyen?
No.
Dr. Siderhout?
Yes.
Dr. Bonham?
Yes.
Council Member Maynard?
Yes.
Okay, Council Member Gluck?
Yes.
Council Member Hayashi?
Yes.
Okay, it's carried by 6-1.
Mr. Kawafuji, just to be clear, you are voting in favor of this?
Yes, 6-1.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. The next fiscal year and the following 5 years. Seth, can you remind us where we are?
Yes, the next line of discussion is to discuss and vote on the general fund revenue forecast for fiscal years 2022 through 2027.
Can we break that up into two discussions, one for 2022 and the second for the out years?
Is it possible to put up on our estimates on the screen?
I can tell you what they are if you, or let's see if I can.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What are we on the record for?
6%
For 22.
for 22. Yep. And then it's 6, and then 6 for 2023 and 4% for the out years.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've changed the base, right, by 4 points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the 6% is a little aggressive given that.
Given that we increased the base by 4 points from negative 6.5 to negative 2.5.
What did we change the base to?
Negative 2.5. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but that's
Hold on.
That's
I'll-
equivalent
Change
to what?
the base to 6,525,000 or 6,527,000,000.
Okay.
So that's the base with our forecast at negative 2.5 set.
Correct.
Well, that's all of 30
Oh,
million.
I'm sorry. No, that's not. Yeah, that is correct. Sorry.
Wasn't that the base for fiscal 19? Close.
Base of fiscal 19 or
No.
fiscal year 2020 is 6.694.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we changed the 6.259 billion to 6.5 525 billion?
527. So you've increased it by
Okay.
267 million. Your
No.
forecast in absolute numbers.
6259 to what?
6527.
Oh, I see. Yeah, 527.
267 million.
Yeah, okay.
So you guys want to, I can show you what you guys are doing on your screens if you're interested.
Yeah.
Do you want me to show it with you? Yeah, I'll show it. So top line is your
Yeah, got it.
forecast, and this is your new forecast, right?
Okay.
And then you can see the differences on the bottom. This should be, yeah, you should see the differences on the bottom. This is a positive number.
If you keep the same absolute number for 2022, the 6.6,
6.6.
yeah, on the top line,
So go to
and
like
and
4.
compare that to, so make fiscal 2022 the same number as in the top line, same as the forecast.
That's 2% roughly.
That's not very
I
much.
was going to
Sorry.
suggest 4% across the board. I know we're only doing one fiscal year at a time, but
Well, we
I
can
think
always
you-
revert back.
That's pretty aggressive, when we dropped the base by 4%. I mean, we increased it by 4%.
yeah, but it's still from a down year, and by fiscal 2022, I mean, barring a new variant that requires us all to go back in lockdown, we're talking about getting back to 70-80% of. I mean, actually, our forecast for visitors by the end of the year is roughly 70% of 2019 levels, and actually, I mean, we have GDP recovering by calendar year 2023, by the end of calendar year 2023. I think that the amount of money that, and well, we're also building into our forecast a infrastructure bill that hasn't even been proposed in Congress yet, but I would argue is very likely to come, and it boosts our forecast quite a bit.
But when you use the number 70%, Carl, aren't you using the calendar year?
Yeah, but I already did these at the beginning of our meeting for a fiscal year basis.
We
By
do
the way,
have,
I'm sorry, Kirsty, but like national forecasters are forecasting the largest increase in GDP growth since World War II.
Yeah, we're gonna be so low in our forecasts.
Yeah.
It's all right. Marilyn can take me to dinner.
Yeah.
Because fiscal 22, Carl, you're talking only 14 months, right? Or 15 months away, roughly.
we need to keep in mind again, the year-over-year comparison of
Yeah.
income tax,
Oh,
two
yes,
income
yes.
tax periods, right?
Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
9 percentage bump in fiscal 21.
Yeah,
Bec-
so we will not have two income tax collection periods in
Yeah,
the
'cause-
the next fiscal year.
Yeah, because we took, as an example, if you take $5 out of a base of 100 and you add it to the next year, the difference is 95 to 105. And
Well, you just added 250 million to your forecast, right? So that's
Right.
exactly what you asked me to add in. You
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
added that in, right?
yeah, but we got it double, right? We got over 300 million in July. Then
Yeah.
we reduced it slightly because we think profits are going to be down overall. So we had 250 million. So that's 550 million. How many points is that? That's almost, well, not 10%, but 9 percentage points.
No.
We will not be collecting the 308 million or whatever our collections were in July of this last year. We will not be collecting that in July of this coming year.
Yes. Yeah.
So we need to take into account that.
That's a
So that's a
4.5%.
hurdle that we need to
Yeah, that's
get
an
over.
excellent point. So Dr. Bonham, what we're saying is the number is really about six. Well, let me see. We had a double, so that's 300 million is how many points? 4.5%. So we're really saying the number is really 6.5, but we're adjusting for receiving the, we had double count. We had an inflated base in 2021.
Right.
Yeah.
Carl, you're on.
We have an uninflated base for visitor arrivals in our council forecast. So our council forecast assumes that in fiscal 2022, we will only be at 58% of fiscal 2019 visitor arrivals. I'm sorry, that's 25% percentage points lower than the UHERO forecast, and I'll bet it's 30 percentage points lower than what DBED's forecast would be.
Well, 58%.
So what is 30% of 17 billion in visitor spending, and what does that do for tax revenues? So that's how much our council's visitor arrivals forecast is too low in my assessment for fiscal 2022.
Right now, what are we worried about? You thinking a third, maybe a third of the regular?
As of February, we were at 30% of what we would have been in 2019.
Yeah, so you're saying that we're going to be at 58 million for the fiscal year 2022. I mean, 58%. We'd have to average about.
No, that's the council's forecast.
Yeah.
For the entire
For the entire fiscal year. Our forecast is 85%.
You think we're going to hit 85% in fiscal 2022?
Yes.
Because we're only at 1/3 of that, right?
Yeah.
We're going to be at 50% by June. I mean, what, you think everybody's just going to stay home? They get vaccinated and they just stay home? I mean, you've got the richest people in the world are all richer than they were a year ago, and they haven't been anywhere, and they're vaccinated, and they don't want to go outside of the United States for a little while. Where do you think they're going to go?
Yeah, but the richest people in the world are just a small percentage of the overall tourist population.
I'm talking about
the U.S.
I'm not talking about multi-billionaires. I'm talking about people who don't qualify for the stimulus check, right? Everybody who didn't qualify for a stimulus check, who's seen their housing wealth go up, they've seen their stock portfolio go up, they didn't lose a job unless they were a business owner and a bar owner, and they work from home and they haven't gone anywhere. Now they're vaccinated and they're ready to go.
But that's a high number, 85% for fiscal 2022, when we're only at 1/3, and we expect people to be completely vaccinated by May or June or July. I think that's a very aggressive number, 85% of the 19.
I guarantee our forecast is lower than DBED's. And I think the hoteliers would tell you the same thing.
Chair? Could I say something?
Vice Chair?
Yeah, I sent around a little memo about one of my concerns with respect to future tourism. And I guess I was looking at some of the things that my clients were saying, that, tourists are coming at the last minute, and I see that there's no groups. Been very concerned about the groups because I've arranged for conventions, and I'm waiting for my niece to come over and get married, and she's had to cancel it twice. So I looked at the requirements for the tiers, and I passed it out to you. I have it here, and I passed it out to you together with Market Insights. And if you look at the tiers, the COVID tiers, the Honolulu COVID recovery framework, and you look at the end of the last page, there is this, the different tier levels, so it should have been emailed to you. And if you look at the actual tier levels and see how the plan is at 100% recovery, that this is the best we'll do. You have social gatherings, which is only, they're going to allow 25 people. And you're gonna allow restaurants, I guess. This is a best case scenario where we don't have COVID. They're gonna allow,
That's not true.
So with
Yes.
all due respect, the
No,
tier
it
system
is.
is going to change.
No, tier 4 is in the presence of COVID, but just with low positivity rates and low disease incidence.
And it doesn't take into account vaccinations at all, right?
Okay.
There is no, the tier system doesn't include vaccinations.
tier 4 is less than 1%.
We know what tiers 4 is.
Okay.
You're
If you
talking
look
about
at
a
tier
policy that
4
will probably change in the next month and a half.
Well, I'm just looking because people have to plan for these events like a year in advance, weddings, conventions, all that. And I'm looking at this, and I had a discussion with the city and county personnel, and they told me, this is the limitations that we have. You're limited to the 25%, 25 people for tours, 50% of capacity for commercial recreational boating. And I have tour boats as clients. And so I'm looking at all the things that they're talking about. And they're talking about break rooms and conference rooms, maximum 6 feet apart. And I said, well, would this apply to seminars or conventions? They said, no. That means that only the people who are in one business. If you're one business, then you can have an event in a conference room as long as you're 6 feet apart. You have social distancing and face covering. But if you're unrelated people, you cannot meet in this manner because there's going to be the social limitations of the 25 people. So you're going to be stuck using this tier 4. And I think that Oahu is close to that area where you guys are going to be in tier 4. I found out what is going on with the neighbor islands. Maui, we allow 100. That includes, of course, the people who are catering. And same thing with Big Island. I think yes?
You're talking about fiscal 2022 or 2021? Because you're talking about a policy that is based on
that's correct.
a
I'm
situation
talking
where
about a policy that I think is going to be,
changed.
So you think that
No,
tier
wait.
4 is going to
We
be
have
in
to
place?
live with the current
Can we
policy.
let one person talk at a time?
This is the current policy that we have now.
We're
supposed to
talking
live
about
with-
fiscal 2022.
Dr.
That's
Brown,
correct.
could you
And
let
this is what's going to
Vice
be
Chair finish?
applying.
Yeah.
And so my point is, I don't see how we can get to the point of a full recovery when we have all these limitations in businesses.
Because they won't be here. Those
Everybody-
limitations will get lifted. Once there's herd immunity, there won't be any tiers. These tiers exist for emergency purposes under the pandemic.
Well,
Tier 4 is a limitation that only exists in the presence of the pandemic.
well, no, but
if the
there's going to be a continuing pandemic. I
Well,
understand that.
then they're going to modify those things because, I don't know. I shouldn't be talking about this because, I'm just reacting from general knowledge, no special
Well,
expertise.
Yeah, so the neighbor islands, they're for the conventions and things, they're doing it on a case-by-case basis. And so you can possibly have more than 100.
Well, let me ask you, what's your point?
I don't see how you can project out a full recovery when there are restrictions on the
We're not.
businesses.
He's not forecasting a full recovery. He's forecasting 85% of a full recovery.
Yeah, but if you look at how much of the wedding businesses, how much of the meetings, conventions, and incentive travel,
The wedding business is happening right now.
you'd find that it's quite a bit. And it's not only the visitor travel, it's also the local people who are having fundraisers, the local people who are having weddings. So we're talking about the impact for businesses that extend beyond the visitor industry.
So you
Scott
don't
has
think,
his hand
so you
up.
don't think we're going to have 4% revenue growth in 2022?
No, I'm just saying, your assumptions that you're making about what the growth is on visitor arrivals and
What's your
activity.
forecast for 2022?
I didn't figure it out with the
Scott has his hand up.
Okay.
Sorry.
Councilmember Hayashi?
Yeah, so Marilyn, I get what you're saying, but I want to respond to that a little bit because I'm not sure if you're aware of, but Hilton Hawaiian Village just restarted their luau with 150 people in attendance. So, the certain restrictions or certain exceptions for entertainment venues. So, to your point of it only being 10, that's not necessarily true. For personal gatherings, that may be true, but there's other exceptions for other types of business events. So, exactly what those ramifications are, I have to admit, I'm not clear on exactly all of the intricacies of it, but it was just announced that, I guess on the 6th, I believe it was, that Hilton Hawaiian Village restarted their startup luau with 150 people and it sold out in minutes. So, just to let you know that there are larger events that are happening right now, even under even under the tier we're in.
Well, I called and asked specifically if I wanted to have a convention, if I wanted to have seminars, if I wanted to have a wedding planned, can I do it? Though they told me there's a limitation here and we can only have the conferences, the larger groups, if it's one business or one entity that's holding it. And their employees go to it. So that's what I was told. And I think that if you say, okay, well, we won't go with this tier 4, tier 3 limitations, then it's another thing. I think that I think for the neighbor islands, maybe they're a little bit more flexible now. I don't believe that it was as simple as that for Honolulu. So, yes. So that was my point, is that, you're assuming in the future, and I'm saying the current rules right now do not allow for that kind of expansion of business. So I wrote it down. So
If I could make a point, hello?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I share Marilyn's concern that it's really tough for any business to survive in Hawaii under even normal circumstances, and to survive when there are restrictions is just really, really difficult. And it's actually heartbreaking to see all the people who are losing their business because of this. So I do share Marilyn's concern. But I would say we are starting from such a low base because we had total shutdown for a while, at least last year. We started opening up, we shut down again. I do see that we're going to have year-over-year growth. And we just need to factor in the fact that we're going to have one income tax collection period instead of two, whatever that comes out to,
Can I make a point about what you guys just did, or what you're implying, what you just did and what you did? So when you raised the forecast before, right, you were implicitly saying that you're, for whatever reason, you think the revenues will increase by the beginning of the year. Now, if you're saying that you have to lower the fiscal year 2022 because of you raised fiscal year 2021, then what you're saying is, oh, we believe in income shifting, right? Like you're thinking you're bringing things forward. But like even in January, you were also forecasting the absence of a double payment, right? So you don't need to do it again. I mean, if you believe it will happen again, then do it again. But like just because you improved one forecast doesn't mean you really have to think about the implications of what happens because you improved fiscal year 2021, that you have to decrease fiscal year 2022.
I certainly didn't mean to imply that.
Okay.
I'm just saying, when you look at a year-over-year forecast, July will not have the extra 308 million in
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
July 2021. So we have to take that into
Yeah.
account.
That's a
when we
big
look at
number.
Right,
Yeah.
but did you take that? I thought, and this is why I just want to make clear, is if you took that into account in your January forecast, you don't have to adjust for it again.
No, but what we did said was
Hmm.
we changed the January forecast from -6.5 to -2.5.
But when economic growth occurs, you're building it like if it's cumulative, right? So the adjustment in your forecast for fiscal year 2021 is reflecting a different economic scenario than what it was in January.
Steph, let's assume that we think overall income will be up 5%, tax collections will be up 5%. We still have to subtract out the 308 out of that number
Yeah,
because it's not going to happen.
yeah, we're not going to get the payment in fiscal 2022.
That it's still cumulative,
Yeah.
but that 308 million is not going to happen, or whatever that number is.
Yeah, it's a timing difference, and you won't have those tax collections occurring twice in the fiscal year 2021. So we have to adjust for it in
22, yeah.
2022.
Well, I mean, you guys already adjusted for it once. And if by adjusting it for it twice, you're double counting.
We're
No,
not, because we went from -6.5 to -2.5. We're not double counting. We're trying to eliminate double counting. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay, well, I'll defer to you guys, but
Mhm.
That's correct. We have to adjust out for that tax, double tax payment that came in the fiscal year 6/30/21 and adjust that out. So because we're going to only have one tax payment in 2022, fiscal year 2022.
But one thing we didn't take into account before was this bill that's about to pass Congress in the January meeting. And it's going to mostly impact, I think, fiscal 21, but there's going to be some carryover impact into 22 because that is going to run into September, right?
Right.
So the unemployment amount, but I guess the amount that goes directly to the government is not going to, I don't think, really
Some
impact.
delay, right? I think there'll be delay in the disbursement.
That doesn't affect our forecast.
Yeah, it doesn't affect, that doesn't affect the forecast, although the
Well,
government.
sure it does. Of course it
Okay.
does. I mean, if the US economy grows by 1 percentage point faster in fiscal 2022 than we're assuming because of the American Recovery Plan,
Yeah.
then of course it affects the forecasts. And I would argue that our GDP forecast in our consensus is at least 1 percentage point too low. And this is how we got on the subject of the tourism forecast for fiscal 2022. And I don't have it's a forecast, right? It's not an assumption for fiscal 2022, at least for the second half of it. The assumption is that we will remain on a trajectory that ends up getting everybody who wants to be vaccinated, and that will change our behavior and it will change the rules. So to forecast fiscal 2022 based on a set of rules that were set up during the pandemic, during the crisis stage of the pandemic, just makes no sense at all. I don't have any qualms saying that, okay, we won't get to 85% of tourism. That's fine. Pick a number, 75%, but it's not going to be 58%, which is what the council's forecast has right now. And so my point is that if you add in another $2 billion in visitor spending, that's going to offset what we're debating, which is these shifts of when people are paying income taxes. I think it's time for somebody to make a motion. And if no one else does, I'm going to.
Well, what my point was, Carl, that we're not trying to forecast how much the state of Hawaii is going to get out of that budget, about the new budget plan. So that was my point. We're not forecasting that. We're trying to forecast economic impact of all that money. It's just floating down from the sky.
Yeah.
Does,
What's your motion?
Well, the question is, do I make a motion that's in the interest of actually finishing this meeting tonight? Or do I make a motion that reflects what I really think? And I
Let's
should do
assume-
the latter. So rather than make a motion, I'll put it out as a conversation piece. I was going to, and actually I was going to move this before we even got started this whole debate, but I would move that we stick with 4% from fiscal 22 through 24, and then we go down to 3.5% for the remaining years.
So 4% for the next 3 fiscal years and 3%
Correct.
for the final 3 years,
3.5 for the final 3.
3.5. Discussion, Councilmember Gluck?
Sorry, I've just been looking at 2022, and I do think the 4% is reasonable and achievable, kind of looking through the model and taking into account that we're only going to have one income tax payment within the year. But coming off such a low base, I think the 4% for 2022 is reasonable. So I'm just looking at the out years now compared to what we had, but I don't see a problem with 4 for 3 years and then 3.5 for 3 years.
Councilmember Hayashi?
I know, I agree. I think I'm looking at the numbers here, and once again, focusing on 2022, I would agree. I think 4% seems reasonable and achievable.
Dr.
So,
Samuels, do you have
what
any
did
comments?
we have before?
I think initially.
We had 6%.
For fiscal 2022.
So if we're adjusting for having a lower base and for
That's
not
okay.
having the extra 300 million,
That takes us to 2%.
so how much would that be if you took out those?
2%, I think, roughly.
What?
2%.
2%. So if we adjusted, yeah, so we have adjusting for the having a lower base in
No,
fiscal
you're
year
going the wrong direction.
and also taking out the 300 million.
No, it's after taking out the 300 million.
Okay, 300 million.
Yeah, so if we adjust for the 308 million, then we're at 2% for fiscal 2022, is my understanding. But what we have, Marilyn, is, you have the new law that's appears to be almost appears to be like a done deal. And I think realistically, I think the economy is doing a little bit better than we expected, at this point.
Kurt?
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Sidos.
Seth, can you plug into your spreadsheet that has the growth rates, the motion that Carl made? 4, 4, 4, and 3.5, 3.5. Is that the motion?
Yes.
Okay, so that means that we don't get back to fiscal 2019 level of 7.1 billion until sometime
2025.
2023, 24. Well, according to
I'm
this,
sorry, you're right. 2024.
2023, pretty close.
23, 24.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's reasonable. I think the economy is going to come back roaring, actually.
In which case, we'll come back and raise the 4%.
Yes, we will.
If it looks that way.
Okay, I make a motion for, well, did Carl, you made the motion, right?
At 4%.
Or was that the discussion? It was discussion.
It was a discussion.
Okay, I'll steal Carl's.
I'll make the motion. I'll convert the discussion into a motion.
I'll second that motion.
So just to be clear, it's at 4% for fiscal 22 to fiscal 24, and it's 3.5% for fiscal 25 and 26.
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Any further discussion, Vice Chair?
Yeah, I'd like to add that I would like to see, the regulations changed and put the assumption that we're not going to have another variant and another lockdown in making our any kind of forecast. Because if there is a mutation or if there's another lockdown, I think that all bets are off as far as our forecasts.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Is all the members okay with that? We're going to put that in the letter, cover letter to the governor.
And please put in the
Thank you.
paragraph about if we get hit by an asteroid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No,
Jack,
Ah,
no mutation,
or a tsunami, or a hurricane.
variants, and yeah.
So with those caveats, qualifications, are you okay at 4, Marilyn?
So no mutations, and then I
No
guess a
variant.
relaxation
No,
of,
no, no,
For long.
no, sorry. We're not, you can't put in the letter there are going to be no mutations. So usually the letter says that we assume that Seth could jump in, but there's a sentence that says we assume that there are going to be no, crazy events like an earthquake or tsunami, hurricane. I mean, I think it does deserve to have some modification, right? That really the course of the virus isn't going to be such that it puts us back into a situation of full lockdown and tremendous travel restrictions. Because there's going to be mutations, and there's going to be another, we're going to end up with booster shots, and we're going to be working through this for several years probably. But that doesn't mean we're going to go back to April and May shutdowns.
So you said you're comfortable with saying no full shutdowns or significant travel restrictions.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's really what we care about, right? Is
Yeah.
things that dramatically alter our ability to interact.
so do you see an end to the pandemic in your forecast?
I mean, we're not doing a pandemic forecast, right? We make assumptions that people will be able to get vaccinated and the vaccine will work and people will go back to relatively normal behavior.
Okay.
So that's what that's the assumption that we're building into our baseline.
Okay, so none of this thing about we can't go back to normal then.
Relatively normal.
Behavior.
Right? We might be wearing masks for quite a while.
Yeah, social distancing and masks, but the restrictions on the businesses is something that I was concerned about, because if you look at the studies that the Visitor Bureau has done, a significant, there has been a lot of tourists coming for these weddings, conventions, meetings, incentive travel. And I want to make sure that we are assuming that everything is going to proceed normally as if we don't have those restrictions for group meeting.
well, I think we're assuming that the trend of opening up is going to continue.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we should be more specific than that.
That's a good way to put it.
Marilyn, are you okay with the 4?
Yeah, with the qualifications.
Okay. Are you
Trend
okay with the language? The trend of opening up is going to
will
continue?
continue.
Yeah, and there's not going to be any full lockdowns.
So we have a motion, right? Are we discussing it, or are we discussing the language of the letter? Are they intertwined?
Intertwined.
Apparently they're intertwined.
Yeah, they're intertwined. I'm using the language you use, Carl, Dr. Bonham. Okay, Marilyn, are you ready for a vote?
Can we vote, please?
Yeah, with that,
Okay. Okay, Vice Chair Niwal,
yes.
Dr. Siderhouse,
Yes.
Dr. Bonham,
Yes.
Councilmember Maynard,
yes,
Councilmember Gluck,
Yes.
Councilmember Hayashi.
Yes.
Okay, so it's unanimously covered, unanimously approved, excuse me. Okay, Dr. Kobe, what the next item is it BNF's report?
yes.
Okay,
We lose Seth?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, it is. Apologize.
Good afternoon, Chair, council members.
Good
My name is
afternoon. Oh,
Donovan.
Donovan.
Hey,
Yes.
Donovan.
I'm with the Department of Budget and Finance.
Yes.
We've provided you with our report of revised projections and general fund non-tax revenues, non-general fund tax and non-tax revenues since the January 7th meeting. Our written report includes a summary of significant changes and it was a long meeting, so I'll try to be very brief. The significant changes in our report, the largest, are pretty much all due to CARES Act money trickling down through various. Some came as a lump sums to the state, but others came through programs. So on table 2A, I'll highlight a few. Table 2A, non-revenue receipts. There's a net increase in fiscal year 21, which reflects federal coronavirus aid, relief, and economic security act reimbursements. This is to the general fund, and this was for the reimbursement to the state for costs associated with distance learning. So it actually went to Department of Education, for the Department of Education, but it went to the general fund. It's about 87 million. And on page 5A, under federal grants, the largest one is net increases in fiscal years 20, 21, 22. And that reflects the reimbursements for unemployment compensation benefits to Department of Labor. That ranged from 1.2 billion to 2 billion. Basically, these are funds that come back out of the U.S. Treasury that the state deposits for in the trust account, and it comes back to the state to make payments on unemployment claims. In addition to that, in fiscal year 21, the state received healthcare payments to the healthcare payments program, 406 million. This is to cover costs incurred by the state for healthcare payments for lower income recipients. And there was also, under federal COVID-19 funds, net increase in fiscal year 21 reflects additional CARES Act funds for emergency rental assistance program. It's 125.2 million. And there was also additional coronavirus relief funds to the Department of Education of 183.6 million. But in our report, we included explanation for all the significant changes. These are just the highlighted ones.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. Any questions on Mr. Chan?
I move to accept the report.
Any second?
Second.
Okay. Vote to approve Mr. Chan and BNF's report. Vice Chair Newell,
Yes.
Dr. Siderhouse,
Yes.
Dr. Bonham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Maynard. I'm not Vice Chair, sorry, Council. It's been a long day. Council Member Maynard, sorry.
Yes.
Council Member Gluck,
Yes.
Council Member Hayashi.
Yes.
Okay, so it's unanimously approved. Dr. Kobe, what is the next item on the agenda? Is it next
Scheduling
meeting?
the next meeting.
Okay, so just to let everyone know, if anyone has any specific comments to the governor's report, if you could send it to Dr. Kobe, and I think you can copy me too, or Dr. Kobe can provide it to me. Other than that, I'm going to review the letter with the vice chair. Last time, because we had conflicting suggestions and we were up against the deadline, it was it was really difficult for Dr. Kobe to try to harmonize or decide what he's, it was very difficult for him to finalize the letter. So as much as I wanted to invite everyone's input, and I still do, if you can provide it before we finalize the letter. Okay, so When is the next general fund reporting date, Dr. Kobe?
June 1st.
June 1st. And do you know when Memorial Day is?
The 31st of May.
34, the day before. Okay, so that's on Monday, the 31st. How is everyone's calendar? Is the 27th too short for you, Dr. Kobe? Like the afternoon of the 27th?
I would prefer to have more information, and I don't think you guys are going to receive any more information that would materially influence your decisions. So
You would prefer maybe what, Tuesday,
yeah, the 25th,
the
maybe something like
25th?
that.
How is everyone on Tuesday, the 25th at 2 o'clock?
I'm good.
Yeah, that would work.
Okay, yeah.
Vice Chair, Council Member Gluck, is that good?
Can make it work, yeah.
Okay. Council Member Hayashi?
Yeah, that works for me as well.
So did that cover everyone? Everyone's okay for that?
We're talking 2 o'clock.
Yeah, Tuesday, May the 25th at 2 p.m.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll see everyone, next on May 25th. Thank you everyone for your input and very vigorous discussion today. Okay,
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Seth, is there anything we need to talk about with the Vice Chair? Oh, did Seth sign off already?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll talk to you by
okay,
phone.
you can call me.